Hey, welcome back. I'm Carey Davis, and this is the Stop Complaining and Work Harder program. So I've designed this for new supervisors in the government, but if you're an old supervisor, if you're an executive, if you work in private industry or are just curious about how things work for management in the federal government, this is a show you ought to watch. Maybe you'll learn something. I've got 33 years of government experience. I just retired, 25 of which were as a manager at all levels, from a first-line supervisor up to the executive suite in Washington, D.C., and at 3 different departments. And I want to provide the viewers with a little benefit of my experience, and maybe you won't make the same mistakes I did, or maybe you can avoid your own mistakes in the future by hearing my challenges and how I learned. I don't have an education in management. I just went through the school of hard knocks like everybody else in customs does, because there is no school to really teach you how to do this. You can, like I've said previously, you can go to university and you can get a doctorate in management. It will not prepare you for the real world. It doesn't. It'll help you get a job, but once you get the job, it's all on you, and there's no one out there to help you. So that said, I want to go ahead and get into it, and the main subject today is electronic communications discipline. And I say electronic communications instead of email because communications are advancing way beyond email. Email is old school, even though in the government we still use email, to a significant portion of the day. But it's not just email, it's your electronic communications via whichever platforms your agency has issued you. And if you think you're going to be smart and use your own device and your own, platforms, whatever they are, however private they are, to discuss government business of any type, even with your wife or your friend, if you get into a courtroom case and the opposing counsel decides that you probably discussed this over a private email account or a private platform, they're simply going to have those records subpoenaed. If an investigator decides to look in your things, a private investigator from, say, an industry representative wants to see how you think about their industry and then use that against you, they'll find it and they'll use it. So, as a very good friend of mine used to say, and this cannot be understated, email, and by that I mean any electronic communication, is not your friend. It's a bad, bad, bad thing. Should only be used when necessary. When I was with DOT, my employees had a terrible habit, and this went back years before I got there. They would discuss their findings via email and then discuss how they were going to proceed in a case, whether they were going to penalize a company or provide them training or however they wanted to do it, or sometimes it would come down to a debate about how the regulations were applied and whether or not a violation actually existed. And of course, we got a court case over. We got sued, so that's fine. We get sued all the time. We went into court, and as DOT counsel was looking at the email exchange, they realized if you took it out of context, it certainly appeared that the investigators that worked for me were trying to figure out a way to screw industry over. They weren't. I mean, they were being honest arbiters of the regulation. But when you took their words out of context, that's how it appeared. That's how it appeared to me when the lawyer came to me and said, "Hey, look at this." And I said, "You know what? You're right. We'll withdraw the penalty." I had no choice because they were simply going to use our own words against us. All my employees had to do was pick up the phone, or it's a modern world, have a Teams call. You can have more than one person on there. Discuss it in person. It costs nothing. I cannot say this enough. If you can replace any electronic communications with verbal communication, talk to your friends, and Gen Z, I'm talking to you, and millennials and Gen X to a great extent, pick up the damn phone. Call these people. You have to have face-to-face communications. I don't understand why people want to have these communications email. It will harm you down the road, and it lasts forever. Imagine some of the things you're saying in text messages. Yes, text messages on your personal phone. Your great-grandchildren get to see. Because they do. It's a permanent record. It's more of a permanent record than that permanent record you were scared of in elementary school. You Gen Xers out there remember how they used to tell us this will be on your permanent record. Well, there is a permanent record now. It's called computers. And it will never go away. Your life is an archive of everything you've written in a computer. But if you talk to somebody, you don't have that problem. So I cannot emphasize enough. Talk to other employees. Talk to other human beings. Interview people. Develop your interviewing skills. You notice my production qualities here in the Work Harder studios are pretty slim. I'm working with a phone and a microphone. That's because I want to go low budget. I want to make this raw so that you can see it's just a guy talking to you about his experiences. But low budget, most of the time, is the very best way. Very best way. So regardless of what you think, regardless of if it's easier or not, and this is a guiding principle I need everyone to listen to. And I get off on tangents when I have these talks with you, but this is a good tangent to get on. Generally, 99% of the time, if something is easier, it's not better. That's why I call the show Work Harder. You can work smarter, or you can work harder. But the common denominator on those two is work. You have to put the work in. You have to take the time and put the effort forward. And sometimes that's more effort than simply typing on your phone. I would say if you're a smart person, most of the time, you should put more effort and talk to other human beings. Pick up the phone, call them, ask them, what do you do? Good example. I love to tell stories, so here we are. The pandemic started, and everyone's scared to death. Everyone's hiding in their homes. This would be 2020, mid-2020, summertime, right? June, July. And everyone, everybody's scared to death. Everybody's hiding in their houses. Masks haven't become a thing yet. My people, to their credit, are out there in the field doing their job every day, making hazardous material safe to transport so that industry can continue. And a big part of that industry was personal protective equipment. Alcohol, masks, you name it, all these things that could be construed as something we would regulate. So the big push my guys did was they went to every distillery in the country and literally every single one they could find and helped them learn to, instead of making and transporting alcohol for consumption, using that same alcohol for hand sanitizer, and how to package it and ship it according to the regulations, which is different than for drinking alcohol. So, these guys did a stand-up job doing that. But what would happen is we had great relationships, and I'm sure PHMSA still has great relationships with trade groups. And one of the reps for one of the major trade groups loved to complain about my employees and how they acted on the job. And, nice guy, he's doing his job, he's trying to protect his industry, whatever. So I'd listen to him. He called me up one day and he said, your investigator is stopping production at a facility in California, and they're being unreasonable, and they're causing a commotion, and they're being very rude and unprofessional. Okay. So I said, all right, what's the guy's name and what's his phone number who runs the facility? And there's a pause. I said, give me the guy's name and phone number. I'm going to call and we'll resolve this. So he gave me the guy's name and phone number. I called him up and I said, I introduced myself. I said, I understand my employee is causing problems and stopping production and being rude and unprofessional. And this guy says, oh, no, they're great. They're helping us out. They've walked us through the numbers. We're getting a lot out of this, and they've been completely professional. I said, that's what I thought, and I appreciate your time. And I hung up. I cleared that stuff right on up. And I can't blame the industry rep. He's doing his job. He's trying to keep us out of his people's business so that they can make money and continue on with their job. But my people had a job to do. But instead of sending an email, instead of assuming that my employee was wrong. Now, if this guy had told me my employee was being rude and unprofessional, obviously I would have dealt with that. But instead of sending an email or getting involved in a text confrontation with this guy, I call him up. And on a human-to-human level, he's going to be far more honest with me than he would be in email. Also, there's no written record 5 years from now of me having this conversation. But the next time I saw that industry rep, I said, you know what? I talked to your guy, and instead of saying, and he contradicted everything he said, I don't have to do that. I said, you know what? And he was great. He helped me out, and we got everything straightened out. And the industry rep said, thanks, Carey, appreciate it. And it worked out. And so, there's a time to be confrontational. Don't get me wrong, and I have. And I've picked bad times to be confrontational. And interestingly enough, bringing the culture from DHS and CBP, which is very confrontational, into DOT, which is not confrontational at all. And the first time I had a meeting and the DHS in me came out, I could see my boss. He looked like he had just seen a ghost because I lit into this guy, and it was funny to watch. But anyways, the point of all this is never, ever, ever, and I can't state this enough, and I'll probably restate this as I give this series over time, I cannot state strongly enough that you should avoid electronic communications if you can. Obviously, you can't. You're going to get forms. You got to do business. But if you have the option of calling someone and resolving any situation verbally over using electronic communication, do so. Do so. This will be the best advice you've ever gotten. 20 years from now, the 18 people that watch this are going to call me up when I'm an older man, and say, Carey, thank God I called this guy instead of emailing him because I would have said something stupid. Oh, and I'll finish this up with one last thing. If you do have to provide a written response to anything, doesn't matter what it is, if you do, you should type your email and then do not send it. Go get a cup of coffee. Go get a Coke. Go ride a bike, go work out, go do something that takes your mind completely away from what the subject of that email was. Then come back 15, 20, 30 minutes later, whatever, and read your email. First, you're going to find all the spelling mistakes you made, grammatical errors, all kinds of things, because your brain tells your eyes everything's fine while you're typing, and you have to disconnect yourself from it to come do all that. But the other thing, you'll see where your writing sounds pompous, where your grammar is just crap. You'll find all kinds of issues. And if you sound angry in an email, and sometimes you are angry when you write an email, and sometimes you're not, but it can sound angry. It can sound like you're chiding someone, like you're being obsequious, or like you're scolding someone. That disconnect will give you the opportunity to get your mind off of it, and when you come back, you're reading it fresh. And then remember, everything you write, someone is going to take 3, 4, 5, 10 years from now and try to attack you with it. They will. It's just a matter of time. So keep all that in mind, and if you can avoid having to write a response, pick up the goddamn phone. That's my best advice to you. It's advice. If you don't follow it, it's all on you. Can't fix that. So we'll leave that there. Next subject I want to take up. Yesterday, but in our last episode, we talked about leadership. And I very, very brief skim over leadership is a subject that you could literally spend decades studying and barely scratch the surface. The military does that with officers, by the way, and it goes on for a long time, and there's a lot of facets to it. As you can with my next subject, management, because if you remember what I said was there's leadership, there's management, and there's supervision, and these are 3 different things. They intersect very, very closely in the center of that Venn diagram, but they're very, very, very different skill sets. So we talked about leadership very, very briefly, and today I'm going to briefly talk about management. What's the difference? Leadership is basically convincing people to do things and do them well, and do them up to your standards or beyond your standards. Some people you have to convince, other people you don't have to, you just have to learn the people. But management is your ability to take in a judgment of your mission, your goal set, all your resources, all your facilities, any other piece on your chessboard, and then where to place them, in what proportion, what timing, and how to execute your mission so that it's successful. This can be really simple. Your mission is to go to the store and get milk. You figure in your head before you ever leave the house, I'm going to get my keys, I'm going to get in the car, I'm going to drive 3.2 miles to the convenience store, I'm going to walk in, the third shelf from the left I know has the milk, I'm going to get a half gallon of milk, I'm going to go to the counter, pay for it, I'm going to drive home, I'm going to drink milk. This is the simplest form of management. It literally comes down to that. You don't know you're doing this, but your mind already has it planned out. You've managed that situation, right? So let's take it to a bigger arena, and the one that I know best, which is a port of entry, an air port of entry. Now, for 90% of your employees, and in Atlanta, we had just a little bit less than 500 employees, about 30, depending on the season, 30 to 40,000 passengers arriving every day. We had to process these people through, and then cargo facilities all around. And my job was to manage all this. Well, I had really good people, and the actual day-to-day work, the person stamping a passport, the person checking cargo, the person clearing cargo, the person, running the CES, all of these things, they knew their job, and I had faith that they would come in and do their job. But I had to know that it takes 40 people to process enough passengers, that volume of passenger flow as it comes in, and do all the computer checks and stamp their passports to work primary. The guys actually in the booths you see when they come through. Okay? And I had to also know how many people I thought would be needed in our secondary inspection, the baggage secondary, the immigration, the admissibility, secondary area, because the people out stamping your passports can't take all the time they need to question you, and they can't search your bags because the bags are somewhere else. And so the logistics of making all this, I had to have a plan. And then if we had special operations, I would have to have plans for that. And then I had a budget. How much money can I spend in overtime to make sure my staffing levels are up to snuff? So all of this is the management. And then I have to manage my day. I had meetings. I had, meetings take up 90% of your day when you're at that level. But I had to take time to plan the budget. I had to meet with the union. I had to deal with issues. I had to, visit the airport authorities. This is just all the time. There's always something. And there's a point, and you first line supervisors will figure this out quickly when you get to be second line, but particularly when you hit that 14 level, you lose control of your schedule. Things just come up on your schedule, and you got to be there. So, that said, I had to manage all that, all while making sure I had that plan. I had to plan out for the time I would go over to the field office and have discussions with those guys in order to make sure the port had the resources it needed to continue. So this is management. It's completely different than leadership, but it touches leadership in that if you don't manage well, your ability to lead will be diminished. You can be George Patton, greatest leaders you ever heard of. If you don't have the ability to manage your resources and manage your operation, everyone you're leading sees that and will cease to follow you. And I don't know how I can make that any more clear, but that's why management is important. So, I'm not going to get down much deeper than that, because as time goes on, we're going to have discussions, and I'm going to start interviewing other managers, other senior leaders that have come and done this, and they're going to give you some of their examples. So that's how we'll get into the nitty-gritty of what makes a great leader, what makes a great manager, what were moments that defined your leadership skill. And in the next episode, we'll talk about supervision and the differences of that. So I want to conclude the show, as we always do, with another episode of Bullshit Bingo. And if you haven't seen the other episodes, Bullshit Bingo is a discussion on those words that they make up in Washington, D.C. to make themselves sound smarter than they really are. And today's word, it's actually a phrase, and I've just noticed this in the last few years. I heard it for years, but it's really become prominent on the news. And so what happens is the words that civil servants use bleed into the political appointees, and they talk to the press, and suddenly it becomes a thing with the press. And so the phrase of the episode is hard stop. If you haven't heard this, just watch some politician talking on CNN, watch the president's press secretary, watch these spokesmen come out and they'll say, we did X, Y, and Z, hard stop. As in, there's no more negotiation on the subject. It's a hard stop. We will not talk about it anymore. Okay, so it's ridiculous. Let's be honest. Saying that is ridiculous. Why don't you just say, we've done all this and we're not going to discuss it any further. We've done X, Y, and Z. There's no need to discuss it any further. This actually makes sense. This is how a human being, an English-speaking human being, would talk in their home. This is how you would talk when you're around other human beings, because it makes sense. But we did X, Y, and Z, hard stop. A, it's rude. B, it's nonsense. And C, it falls perfectly into the bullshit bingo category. So the term hard stop is a Washingtonese way of saying, I'm not talking to you about this anymore. And it's a way of seeming powerful when you are not. What would be far more powerful is to speak slowly, concisely, make your point, and then listen to the discussion from the other side. That's it for today. I want to thank each and every one of you for tuning in. I cannot emphasize enough discipline, electronic communications discipline. Please make sure that you practice it on a regular basis. And for that, thank you for your time. We'll see you on the next episode from the Work Harder Studios. Quit complaining, work harder.